When rapid speed down to 2,500.
Good point, wherever you reduce speed to 180.
Blackbox.
All right, hey everybody, KP here, KP's Blackbox. Today, I have a great guest that I've actually been working on this for about a year now, Bear. Behind the scenes, you didn't know we had this Intel thing running on it. And my new OPSO, a guy named Shannon Shortridge, or AKA Shorty, AKA Steven. He's got so many names that, I have to make sure everybody knows who I'm talking about. But Shannon's now my OPSO here in the firm, but he's a 21-year Navy veteran, served in a couple of capacities with you. And so we were just talking a couple of weeks ago, and he's like, hey, man, I've got a really cool friend that's a veteran who's in the business. He'd be great on your show. And I go, yeah, what's his name? He's like, Bear Handlon. So my guest today, Mr. Bear Handlon, the great Bear Handlon. And with a name like Bear, man, I mean, you were destined for Goldilocks hair, a great SEAL career, a great business. Who in the hell named you Bear? Mama or dad? Who had influence?
It was dad. It was a nickname when I was like 2, so it's not on the birth certificate, unfortunately. But,
I'm disappointed.
Yeah, my real name's Tim, but no one knows that. Oh, so
they do now.
I think it was my dad when I was 2 or 3, and it stuck. So,
but Bear stuck all the way through your lifetime. Wow,
yeah,
that's cool, dude. Thanks for showing up. Luke Meacham says hello.
Oh, right on. Tell him I said hi.
The German football player who's American, prior SEAL.
He's got better hair than me too.
He's got
the flow going.
He is definitely
He's got the helmet flow going.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. And the ladies love that red hair on that Viking kid. It's pretty cool. Shout out to Luke Saucy Paws.
That's right.
Who's also an ambassador for Bear's company, Born Primitive, which we'll talk about Born Primitive today. I know we don't want to over embellish, but you got a good thing going there. It's a great business that you started. But I know, like with any business owner that I've interviewed, especially vets, you bring a different perspective to business, and that's what I want our guests to hear today, Bears. The ups and downs of being in that world. What's it like? What's the grind like? Did you ever think about quitting? Those types of things we're going to talk about. But let's back up first. One of the things that I like to do in my podcasts is honor those who have served, and not necessarily putting our community in your SEAL community on a pedestal, but just to say, hey, these guys in our community, there's some who made an ultimate sacrifice for the values and freedoms that we hold dear to our heart. And I know I've seen some of your posts. As a retailer, I mean, you've put yourself and your business out there and made no apologies for stances that you've taken to serve our community and to pay homage back. So, man, I salute you and salute that mentality in business. But more importantly, I'd like to salute those who have given it all for our freedoms.
Absolutely. Cheers.
Cheers. This is an excuse also to get the jitters out on a podcast and just go in the flow, right?
And drink 12-year-old whistle pig
12-year-old whistle
at 10:30 in the morning on Friday.
It was your pick.
It's a good pick, right?
Yeah, it's a great pick. I was waiting for something. Everybody tries to be courteous and kind when I go, you get to pick. You get to decide what we're going to, the brown juice, what we're going to put down.
It was unopened, so it looked like it needed some love.
It did. It was lonely, so thank you for making it feel important.
Absolutely.
I'm going to just leave the lid off this thing. All right, man. So getting rolling today. Give us a little background on Bear, a.k.a. Tim.
Grew up in the Midwest, Indiana guy, youngest of 3 brothers. Good upbringing, a lot of sports growing up, football, basketball, baseball. Got the entrepreneurial itch at a young age. About 7th grade, I launched a lawn mowing business.
A lawn mowing business?
Just walking door to door, literally with a lawnmower and a weed whacker. People probably felt sorry for me, so they picked up a couple lawns. I think that was the beginning of the kind of that entrepreneurial itch.
Yeah.
Of billing your clients and getting paid in cash and stashing it away under.
Careful now. The Internal Revenue Service has 80,000 agents they're trying to put on us now.
And grew up. I football started to take off in high school, so had the opportunity to go play football in college. Played linebacker at Yale University. Graduated there after 4 years.
Yale still has a football team.
We do, yeah. We're a Division I program.
Right.
Yep. So that was a really cool experience.
Yeah.
And that threw me into the corporate world for about 4 years. Went and worked for Red Bull, did marketing for them.
No kidding.
Got really cool exposure to what it's like to build a brand. Maybe not build a brand; it was built by then, but how to market a brand in a really unique way that kind of makes you stand out. And then decided to pivot and join the military. I was 26 at the time and went into the Navy. That was something I really wanted to do. Really, starting around 8th grade is when 9/11 happened for me.
Okay,
that planted the seed. Was going to do it out of high school. Football kind of took off. My parents convinced me, hey, why don't you go get a college degree? And if you still want to do this crazy dream here, then you can do it when you graduate.
Right.
So did that. Had to get a surgery on my shoulder when I graduated college from a football injury. So that kind of delayed the military thing. And then there was some family pressure once I healed up and was ready to kind of sign on the line and ended up punting on that for a couple of years and buried it. But like anything, if you really are meant to do it, you can't bury it. So eventually I started secretly training again, going to the pool early in the morning, going to the track, and got back in the system and got accepted into the SEAL officer pipeline to go to officer candidate school. And then on Mother's Day, about a week before I left, I told my mom and gave her the acceptance letter and said, I'm rolling in a week. And that wasn't a great day for her. Went to OCS, did that, went through the pipeline, ended up going out to the East Coast teams, and did just under 8 years in that. And then now I'm running Born Primitive, launched that a few months before I joined the Navy, which was, kind of hilarious in hindsight. The fact that I was trying to launch a business and then go to OCS and particularly going to Naval Special Warfare, totally insane. But figured out a way to make it work. Here we are, coming up on, we're well over 10 years in the business, and we got 70 employees sold all over the world. We got some really cool things in the works as a company. Donated $2 million to date as an organization to
$2 million
veteran and
awesome.
Cancer research and prevention, first responder causes. During COVID, we donated over $200,000 to local gyms to help them stay in business because they were shut down. So that's probably my most proudest achievement, is being able to leverage the platform we've built to do good and to double down on the values we've actually promoted. I see a lot of corporations, and I roll my eyes because, pardon my French, but I think a lot of them are full of shit when they say these things.
I concur.
And it's like, what are you actually doing to help, ABC or whatever it is you're claiming to support? Ours, one of our biggest things is supporting our military and first responder communities. And when you look at what we've done, as well as just the makeup of our employees, over half of our employees are veterans, military spouses, former first responders, spouses of first responders.
So why?
I think,
and I know why it can be a defensive question, but what led you
honestly,
to choosing
it wasn't
veterans?
It wasn't. It's
or
not,
are they attracted
honestly,
to you?
it's not a deliberate thing. When we hire, it's 100% merit based.
Okay.
And I think just we're in a military town.
Merit based, like Dalio's meritocracy, or merit based in that your resume, your past performance.
Best person gets the job.
Best
Bottom
person
line.
gets the job.
Don't care about your background. Best person gets the job, and that's how it should
Capitalism.
be. Yes. Because hey, I'm trying to run a highly efficient and highly performing organization.
Yeah.
So I have to pick the best people because the margin for error, and especially I'm in the fitness apparel space. At least that's the core of our business.
Right.
Crazy competitive.
Right.
I don't have that buffer. I'm not some software company or some medical device sales company that has all this. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just, I'm in an industry, low barrier to entry. Anyone can do it. Every influencer, under the sun is starting up their new fitness leggings brand every other day. So I have that to compete against. So we can't afford to hire people that, are that we're giving favors to for any particular reason. But it's, I think, because we project ourselves as a brand that supports our military and first responder communities, a brand that is unapologetic about loving our country and what it stands for, that attracts those individuals because they say that's where I belong.
Bear, let me take you back. So you said some things that were interesting. Thanks for sharing all of that. It's super awesome.
Cliff Notes version, yeah.
Super contextual for where I want to take the interview today. But take me back to 18-year-old Bear, to 18-year-old Bear or Tim, or what they call you in high school. What's your buddies call you? Bear.
Yeah.
So it's Bear.
It's
all
Bear.
Right, so it's going to keep it at Bear.
Unless I'm in trouble, then it's Tim.
Tim or Timmy? Does mom give you that? Timothy?
I think it's if I get Tim from my mom, it's
you're like, oh shit,
what'd I do?
Yeah, right.
Even at 36 years
It's like
old.
Kenneth.
Yeah.
I have Kenneth Porter and Company. Only my mother has permission to call me Kenneth.
Yeah.
All right.
Good to know.
Yeah. Like I'm going to come over there and put you in some hold, right? But take me back to 18-year-old Bear. You get this opportunity in football, and I can relate and empathize. Maybe is not the right word, but I had an opportunity to play football at college. My experience went a little different. That's for a different podcast, different day. Go Liberty Flames back in the day when it was not the program that it is today. It's, and I would compare that a lot to Yale. Yale in the 1920s. I mean, right? I mean, it's at the top of collegiate football. It peels off. So did you have any other offers other than Yale?
Yes. The other Ivy League schools, I pretty much could have probably went to any of them. In college football recruiting, how it typically works is every school kind of has a depth chart of recruits, right? And all the big schools have all the top recruits, of course, at the top of their depth chart. But, of course, everyone can't sign those guys, right? He's going to pick one school and he's off the board. I had the opportunity. I had a decision to make. I can early commit to Yale in the middle of my senior season and be done with having to worry about where I'm going to school and just be able to worry about playing football.
Yeah.
Or I can wait until these other blue chip recruits start committing to the big schools, and then I start maybe going up on the depth chart, the recruiting depth chart, of course, of some of these bigger schools. So at the time, it was, at best a walk-on, like a preferred walk-on at like a bigger school, like a Big Ten school. Probably could have gotten a scholarship to a MAC school. Or, hey, there was a slight chance if I had a great season and a lot of the Big Ten schools, their top guys committed to, Ohio State and this and that, by the end, you might actually be, in a position to receive an offer, right? But you're rolling the dice on that.
Can I play the comparison game with you for a minute?
Sure.
So in high school, I played outside linebacker, and I also played fullback. I ran a 4.7 40. I was 215 pounds. I went to a private Christian school called Greenbrier Christian Academy right here in Chesapeake, Virginia, but wasn't highly recruited. I actually had to tap the coach on the shoulder at Liberty University and say, "Hey, I want to give this a shot." And they're like, "Okay, we'll give you a shot." When you were in high school, do you remember your 40 time?
4.6.
Yeah. All right. So you're beat me by 1/10 of a second. You played outside linebacker?
In high school, I was outside.
Outside linebacker.
Yeah.
You were lining up typically over against like a tight end.
Yeah, I was. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Or slot. Sometimes slot receiver. Depending.
Yeah. So like I lined up over a guy named Eric Green at Liberty, who was a tight end. Ended up in the NFL. He was 6'6", 315 pounds. Could run a 4.5 40. So I'm like, holy cow. So the reality for me was bigger, stronger, faster. I'm not sure this is going to work out for me. And so I guess you could say I rung the bell early and said, this shows me that I'm in a group that for me to put in the work and the effort and the time, maybe I get to play in my senior year. Mm-hmm. What was your mentality as an 18-year-old then?
Well, I think it's worth rewinding a little bit. So my two brothers were phenomenal athletes. So I was coming in as the third Handlon with a big shoes to fill.
Okay.
My oldest brother was all-state in 2 sports. My middle brother, Matt, was the first athlete ever to get conference MVP in all 3 sports he played, all-state in all 3 of them.
That's huge.
He was the best athlete of the 3 of us by far. So then this little dude comes in. I was late to develop, so I had the pedigree, but it was kind of like, all right, who's this?
You had the last name.
Yeah, that's it. You know what I mean? I was at a sophomore year. I think I was 6'1", 130, soaking wet. So I was a string bean.
What?
But I had football instincts, so I could, you know what I mean? Because I had grown up around it, and I played from a very young age. So at least
What did your mom and dad do?
My mom was a microbiologist, and my dad was a family law attorney. Had his own law practice.
Okay.
So I had
Good pedigree there.
yeah,
right?
yeah. I had good football IQ, but I hadn't grown into my body yet. I was a late bloomer. I wasn't afraid. I was a wild man, but I was slow. I was not strong. I remember my 8th grade bench max was 90 pounds because my buddy Jared got 95, and I was really pissed about that. He was able to
Shout out to Jared.
He was able to put the 25s on the bar, and I got buried by it. So, sophomore year, you get to the varsity team, and it's a whole new ball game. And basically, what I did was I realized I need to live in the weight room and just start eating like a horse, and no one's going to outwork me. To me, I had a chip on my shoulder because I had something to prove. The coaches
Something to prove to whom?
I think the people that were, and maybe I made this up in my head, but that were assuming I would never be what my brothers were, and that he's only getting. They only know about him because of his last name. You know what I mean? And I was like, all right, well, watch me. So I committed the next 2 years to just living in the weight room. And even I took the weight training class in school, but then I was the student aide to the strength coach. So I got 2 back-to-back periods in the middle of the day.
Infiltration, right?
So I got 2 hours every school day to train uninterrupted, and he would let me stay up there during the passing period. So I'd get 2 hours of lifting in every single day.
Yeah.
Even on game days, I would lift. I didn't care. And then when I was playing basketball, baseball, didn't care if we had a game. I was lifting legs. I was like, the long game here is not this JV basketball game right now. I'm trying to play Division I football.
Wow. So you had a focus. You had a goal then.
Yeah.
To say D1 is where I'm headed.
Yeah. And I think, by the time I got to my senior year, I had grown into my body. I was, 6'2", 205, which for a high school linebacker is a pretty good size. That's still right now. I'd kind of laugh at that, but that, for a high school player, that's a good size. And I knew going into my senior season that all of the Ivy League schools were, all the schools, honestly, for that matter, that were recruiting me, they said, we want 2 games of tape. Unedited. Just send us the whole game. We want to watch you. Don't send us a cheesy highlight video. We want to see the whole game, how you read your keys. So I went into that first game thinking, all right, my whole life depends on how I perform in these 2 games. So remember, before the first game, I'm vomiting. It was a big rival school opening game in August. It's hot.
And you're vomiting because you're nervous?
I was vomiting in the weight room because I was realizing all of the work I had done since I was a kid will culminate in these 2 games of game tape. Right.
Yeah.
So I had never been nervous to the point that I vomited, but I did. But then I played great. And I sent those 2 tapes off. I think it was around week 5 or 6. The Ivy League schools were calling me and said, "Hey, we like the tape. We want you to early
What was
commit."
the Ivy League attraction? Is it your grades?
So my middle brother
talent?
Matt played at Yale. He was a strong safety. So I became familiar with, hey, this is a Division I program. You still get nationally televised games. The Yale-Harvard game will have 55,000 at that game. Huge rivalry, one of the longest rivalries. So I got to be a part of, all right, this is actually kind of a cool thing. But, however, when you leave here, you're going to have an Ivy League degree, and this is going to open up all these doors for you that, you can use to get a good job and eventually, you know what I mean? So it was through that lens that I saw it.
Sidebar?
Yeah.
My mentor in the financial business, Yale graduate who played basketball at Yale.
Oh, nice.
Ronald Dukes.
Okay.
You have to look him up.
Right on.
So anyways, thought I'd drop that one on you.
Matt, my middle brother, kind of planted that seed because I was going to the games. I would listen to all the games on the AM radio, and you know what I mean, back in Indiana and this. So that's kind of what kind of got the wheels turning towards, hey, this could be something I would like to pursue. And it kind of, and I knew, hey, there's a grade component to this. So I committed to the books. I was a total dork. Took all the AP classes and realized I needed to do that because
to compete at Yale,
you have to have very good grades to get in, even as an athlete.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have gotten in if I didn't have football, but I was 4th in my class out of 550 students. So it wasn't like I was some slouch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wasn't as smart as the people that were there on academic merit, but I could absolutely hang in the room with them. You know what I mean?
What was the influence of your parents? Your father, an attorney, your mom, a biologist. I mean, did that have some influence on, like, hey, Bear, football is important, but you're going to study?
I don't think so. I think they just set a good example, and that transcended to anything you were doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it was like, hey, you work hard, you apply yourself. But there was no pressure. It was like I think, and that's kind of in hindsight a cool thing, because I think like more is caught than taught. You're right, as a parent.
More is caught than taught. I like that.
And I'm seeing my parents work really hard. You know, my dad was the type of guy. He'd get up before everyone else and go mow the old lady neighbor's lawn, push mower, takes him 2 hours, and he'd be back in the kitchen making breakfast with grass clippings still on his legs.
Wow.
And I haven't even woken up yet. And I'd say, what do you do? Oh, I just mowed Irene's lawn. You know what I mean? So that was with it's funny when you're young, you don't, like, you kind of laugh at that, like, oh, it's dad being dad.
Dad's a geek.
But you realize over time you're picking up those habits of
more is caught than taught. I love that, man.
Right? You're observing. You can be a parent to tell your kid, oh, here's the values, but if you're not actually doing them, what's it? You know what I mean?
By the way, that's a Born Primitive T-shirt. That's TM'd. Can't use it. Bear's got it.
That actually was from my pastor at church.
No kidding.
But I loved it. Pastor T, shout out Ascent Church.
Now you got to give 10%.
That's right.
Back to Ascent.
Pastor
right?
T, you get a 10% royalty on that.
He's going to hold you to that.
Market standard.
I'm a preacher's kid. I know what that pastor listens to this. He's got you now.
But so, you know, for better or worse, I had the foresight to realize, all right, I need to get in the weight room. I need to do the conditioning. I need to have good grades, and if I can do all three of those things and then perform on the field, it will give me an opportunity to get somewhere that is otherwise hard to get to. And I think when I was a senior, there was only 5 people from the whole state of Indiana that were at Yale. So especially public school, right? I wasn't set up to go make it to an Ivy League school. Where some of these Northeast private schools, they're literally like they're producing machines for Ivy League school kids, because 60% of the school ends up making it into an Ivy League institution, because that's how they're set up, and that's why their parents are paying $70,000 for
and now they're globally competing.
Yeah, it's nuts. I had a roommate who went to a New York City private school, and he was telling me how the time for his 9th through 12th grade, his parents are paying $70,000 a year. When he was in kindergarten, it was $30,000 a year. Yeah. But that whole system feeds into, all right, well, if you get into this system, then, there's a 60% chance your kid gets to an Ivy League school. So that was a whole new, me and my other roommate, he would eventually become a Green Beret. We were both public school kids. He was in Georgia. I'm in Indiana. We were laughing at this guy like, oh, your parents paid, $1 million over K through 12, and our school was free, so we're going to public school. You know what I mean? So we had a good joke on that. But for I was fortunate to be able to get that opportunity, and then once week 5 rolled around, the school started calling me and saying, hey, we're basically ready to give you an offer. And Yale, Harvard, Princeton, Penn were my the top 4. And then I remember, I think it was like a Friday morning. It was on a game day. The coach, my recruiter from Yale, called me and said, hey, like, I want you to make a decision. You don't have to worry about your season anymore. We want to give you an offer. And I remember I took it that morning, and then I was just like, it felt like this giant burden was off my shoulders.
Wow.
And then I remember the Penn coach called me and gave me a bunch of shit, because he said, like, if you say you're some blue collar kid and now you're going to Yale when you should have gone to Penn because we're more blue collar than them, blah blah blah. And it was. I remember that call. But anyway, that was a cool moment. And then I just got to kind of play with house money on the field. The rest of the season, and that made me play even better, which is really cool.
So if you're talking to an 18-year-old who happens to stumble across this podcast today, what advice do you give to 18-year-old Bear today in your 30s, 40s? I don't even know how old you are.
36.
36. Yeah. So what do you say to 18-year-old Bear? What would you have done different? And it's okay if it's nothing.
I mean, I like the approach I took. I definitely sacrificed a lot of things that my friends, didn't have to sacrifice, but it was absolutely worth it. That's at an age where you can really get after it and get away with it.
Yeah.
Right? Your gas tank is always full.
Right. Recovery is like.
Yeah. You don't have family considerations. You don't have other people to care for. So I think, to zoom out a little bit, 18 to 30, get after it. You know what I mean? You don't realize how much of an advantage you have until you start having little humans dependent on you
Yeah.
and other things, right? That you know, before you know it, you can't live your life like that unless you're going to be really negligent in a major area that you shouldn't be negligent in, right?
Yeah.
So I got a 3-year-old daughter, so
I've seen some of your posts. That's a big part of your life, I can tell.
Yeah. So I've had to reel some of those other things in and not burn the candle at both ends. But at that age, that is your opportunity to get after it, and make a decision on what it is you want to achieve, and then reverse engineer that outcome. So for me, it was very clear.
Love that.
All right, to get into a Division I Ivy League university, I have to have good grades. I need to be a good football player. All right, really simple. Study really hard, take all the hard classes, live in the weight room, eat like a horse, watch tape, and do your conditioning. And then when football season rolls around, just be a savage. A pretty simple formula. It wasn't complicated, but I knew it from freshman year what that took.
However, it sounds to me that that's very process oriented. You said something about reverse engineering. It's like you thought with the end in mind. If you want to have this future goal, and we're thinking about this from a business process, you envision what the future looked like. You saw future Bear, it seems like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but 18-year-old Bear saw 22-year-old Bear and chunking it down.
Yeah, or 15-year-old version saw the 18-year-old
15
version. That's
saw
really
18.
when it started. You know
Okay.
what I mean? Because I was like, okay, well, how do I do what my
All the way back to the lawnmower Bear
Yeah.
saw
yeah.
the 15-year-old, saw the 18-year-old.
Yeah, and I think even getting into the SEAL teams, it was the same way.
Okay.
Right. What am I going to be evaluated on in this criteria? What do I need to be proficient in, and what's work backwards from that? Okay, I need to learn how to swim. I need to be a better runner. I was a 250-pound linebacker. That's not really good for long-distance running. All right, so I had to change my training methodology.
Right.
I need to change my nutrition. I started doing CrossFit because I wanted to get more endurance. You know what I mean? I need to get letters of recommendation. I need to do this. I need to tie myself up in the deep end and figure out how to kick with legs bound up. All these little things you're able to break down, you know what I mean? Control the controllables.
Yeah.
And then you lower that kind of that random factor that can always come in. You know, you can't completely erase that, right? But
The way I was taught was E plus R equals O. Events plus response equals outcome.
Yeah.
The R, though, is your response. So it sounds like to me, like in the pool, I don't know how to kick. Your response was, I need to learn how to kick. If I want to improve the outcome, the only thing I can change in that formula of events plus response equals outcome is how you respond. So it sounds like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong in this, in your opinion, the only factor that you could control was response. And so every time you met a challenge or you met a new obstacle, it wasn't, oh, there's an obstacle there, I need to stop. It was, how do I get over it? How do I get around it? How do I overcome it? Sounds like your response is the only factor that changed there.
Yeah, and I don't mean to like make it seem overly simplified, but when you really break down, when you work backwards from an end state and you break it down, it becomes pretty clear in what you need to do. I think the difference is the people that are actually willing to do it.
Yeah.
You know, are you willing to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning for like 2 years straight to go to a cold pool and get in there and then go straight out to the track, even in the winter, an outdoor pavement track, and do your 400s and 800s and mile repeats, and then go to work all day and then go to the weight room after and do strength training and weighted pull-ups and this and that, while you're then running a business at night and talking to suppliers at 2 o'clock in the morning. Like, to me, you know, everyone can see what is required, but to actually do it. But when you break it down in just the like micro doses, it's not that hard. You know what I mean? Like
Chunking it down.
Jumping in that pool at 6 a.m. was always brutal. I hated it. It was like I get the chills thinking about it. But you knew, all right, these small tasks will eventually add up to me, hopefully getting a trident pinned on my chest 3-4 years from now. So
Did the Q word ever come into your mind?
Did the what?
The Q word. Quit.
No.
Anything resembling quit. I mean, it couldn't be all whipped cream and cherries. There had to be points where
I think the only quit that came in was I was in the application pipeline, and I was getting a lot of pressure from my family, and I was married at the time, Mallory, she's actually the co-founder of Born Primitive. We have a great relationship. She still runs the business with me.
That's awesome.
We were her family and my family were putting a lot of pressure on me of like, why would you go do this? You have a great life in Indiana. You got good friends, and I did have a good life. I had a great job with Red Bulls, loving it. We had great friends. Life was pretty easy.
You had wings.
Yeah. I had unlimited Red Bull, which was a nice little perk. But I was, up every night staring at the ceiling thinking about, hey, I think I need to do this. When there's other grown men fighting for you overseas and you're in some air conditioning house, watching football on a Saturday, drinking a cold beer, that can mess with you a little bit. You know what I mean? So I gave it up. I said, screw it. All right, you guys win. I'm going to bury this thing. So I would say in the whole process, that was my one quit. But I quickly, maybe not so quickly, but eventually realized after it was kind of nagging at me internally for basically since the moment I made that decision that, hey.
So if I'm hearing you right, you had to quit one thing to have the opportunity for the passion of another thing you wanted to pursue.
Well, it was the same thing. I quit my application. I rescinded my application to the SEAL program.
Okay.
It wasn't like I was in yet. So it's not like they were like, oh, we'll take you. And then I was like, oh, never mind. I was still in the application process. And I kind of just said, hey, never mind, I'm out. And a bunch of the guys that I was training with eventually made it in and started going through the pipeline. So I'm friends with these guys. So I'm starting to see that, all right, he just passed Hell Week. He's here. He's in third phase. Oh, he just got pinned. He's getting signed to a SEAL team now. And I'm like starting to get major, like these guys are.
FOMO.
Yeah. So I secretly started training again back at the pool where we all used to train together. And then I remember, probably did that.
Secretly from who?
My wife.
Okay.
Yeah. And my parents, they lived, a couple hours north, so they wouldn't have known either way.
Right.
I just told her I was going to the gym. I didn't tell her I was going to the pool. And I remember it was funny what ratted me out was she was like, I think grabbing like this sweaty laundry from my gym bag, and I had wet rope in there. Normally if your spouse is finding rope, maybe it's for other reasons.
Yeah.
But we would do the drown proofing stuff. So I would tie up my feet together and go to the deep end and practice the drown proofing portion of something we get tested on in training. And I left it in there, which was a bonehead move because I was covering my tracks a lot better usually. And she kind of threw the counter. I was like, what is this? You know what I mean? I was like, damn it. She knows. She's like, are you back at the pool? And I was like, yeah. And then I basically had to break it down and say, listen, I can't kick this. I have to do this or I'm going to regret it when I'm 60. I know we're married. I know I said I wouldn't do this, but take 24 hours. Think on this. If we need to get separated because I have to do this, I totally understand. I won't fault you, but take 24 hours and then I need a yes or no decision. And then we're moving out. And there's no more, we're not screwing around anymore. This is happening. We're going 100 miles an hour. No one's going to stop me. And my family will get over it. I have to do this. I can't expect you to understand this is happening. And so I remember she woke up the next morning, came down to the kitchen and was like, all right, we're going to do this, but you better not effing quit. And I was like, all right, roger that.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's do it. So got back in the pipeline, got accepted. And then I remember I had my parents come visit for Mother's Day, and I was leaving like a week later, and they were getting ready to drive back up to northern Indiana. I said, hey, Mom, before you leave, just one more thing. And I sat them down, and I handed her the letter, and she said, what is this? I said, just read it. And then she started crying because it said, like, even, and my report date was June 10th, June 14th, which was like, a couple weeks after. And, and then it started. So I ripped the Band-Aid off. I knew, I think 4 or 5 months before that I was going, but it's like, why torment her for a few extra months? Yeah. And that's what I did, and rock and roll.
So you get to the teams and you go through buds. Can you give me any experiences that, again, I've got a lot that we can peel the onion back on those early experiences as a high school football player turned collegiate player at an Ivy League school. Now you get to one of the biggest challenges in life for anybody who accepts that. And I want to bring that back and we get into this end of our interview today about how that affects you as an entrepreneur today, as a business owner, and the decisions that you make. But peel the onion back a little bit on buds, on SEAL training, on taking your first troop. Love to hear from leadership down to just being in this gentleman's club where everybody's the same?
Yeah, well, loaded question, but I'll say incredible experience. Absolutely do not regret doing it. I was fortunate enough when I was at Yale playing football, I was around a very high caliber individual. All these guys were highly motivated, great athletes, great dudes. And when you show up, you're like, man, how did I get here? Like, this is, I don't belong
Bigger,
here.
stronger, faster.
You know what I mean?
In all ways.
And I think you become a product of your surrounding, right?
Yeah.
So I think half of, or maybe 80% of it is just immerse yourself in the right environment with the right people, and the other things will take care of itself as long as you
Success is contagious.
Yeah, right. So I was very fortunate to come from that environment, and then I'm thrown into this crazy new environment that is, very similar in many of those ways, but also very different. But still, like the theme of you are around a very high caliber, highly motivated individual that is a 1 in a million type person that you're not going to find on the street. You know what I mean? All of a sudden now you're just co-located with these people and immersed into this super high pressure environment, right? So to go through that process, I think just to develop as a man was incredible.
You entered buds at how old? 21?
I was 26.
26.
Yeah, so I was a little bit older. I think it was a good happy medium. I had some life experience. Some of those guys that were 18, 19, most of them, I think we only had one make it at that age because, they still don't know what the hell they're doing. Right. And they're still a little bit emotional, and, it's a stressful environment, obviously. So I think it was a good age for me. And, it's pretty intense experience. I think we started with a little over 200 guys, and, by Tuesday of Hell Week, we were down to 19.
Wow. And you went to OCS first. So
I did.
Can you explain that as an officer versus enlisted?
It's where you go to get your commission. So you go there for 12 weeks. Academy students get a commission out of the academy, obviously. Right. I like to joke OCS kind of like the express lane. That's for people who have a college degree that didn't go to academy, that kind of get these wild card spots to go earn your commission at a school that's a 12-week program.
A lot of guys end up as SWO or surface warfare officers.
Yeah,
right?
You get assigned a designation, when you get to OCS. So, everyone knew, okay, he's going to try to go be a SEAL when he's done. That person's going to try to be a submarine or, whatever it is.
Right.
So you go knock that out. That part sucked. And then you go straight out to buds.
And it sucked. Why? What?
It was just like, it was a stepping stone to get to
you
where
probably got out of shape, got to step back in a lot of ways.
Well, that was the thing. We got a 45-minute PT every morning at 4 a.m., but it was very compared to what I needed to be doing, this is not enough, to the point where I knew. So they had a rule, they can only remediate you 10 minutes for every hour, right? I saw this as an opportunity. I want to get remediated because I need the workout. So I would purposely screw up the greeting of the day in the hallway because I know the drill sergeants would remediate me. So if it was 11:50 a.m., I would say good afternoon. And as you know, as a Marine, you don't say good afternoon until it's afternoon on the dot, right? They'd say, candidate, do you see your watch? It's 11:50. Drop down. And I'd be doing mountain climbers and this and that. So I would do that on purpose. I didn't do it in I wasn't ever,
you will go until
I wasn't
I'm
ever
tired.
Disrespectful. I purposely did it in a way that it wasn't it didn't appear malicious, but it was 100% intentional. So I could get remediated. And then the people that were walking the hallway with me would get furious because why'd you do that? And I'm like, why? Because I needed to do mountain climbers and push-ups because I'm going to get out of shape. So I made the best of it. We push the beds together at night and do dips, pull-ups on the shower curtain, pretty standard stuff, flutter kicks all day, burpees. But it was kind of like prison style. What I mean? It was.
A lot of people would listen to this, Bear, and go, something's wrong with you.
Well, it was funny because my roommate was a meathead too. So we were definitely the only two people in that entire building that were doing dips at midnight in their room when we should.
And you got to get up at 4
We
a.m.
should have been shining our boots,
That's
right? And we were like, I don't care. My boots are shiny. I want to get remediated anyway. So let's do some dips and pull up supersets and go to bed. But regardless, by the time I showed up, I remember I failed the first 4-mile run. And it's a 32-minute 4-mile, which is an 8-minute pace, but they game the first one and they make it longer because they want half the class to fail. And I had gotten my rundown. Even though I was a bigger dude, I had gotten much better than I was. And I think when I tested the 1.5 miles, I was low 8s, on a mile and a half, which is a pretty good clip, right?
Yeah.
And then I remember I failed that first run, and it's because we hadn't really run. You know what I mean? I'd lost all of that conditioning, and I kind of had this moment of like, man, I could be in trouble because the show starts in like a week and a half.
I went to Paris Island at 220 pounds, could do 50, 60 pull-ups, sit-ups was not a problem. The run, when I got to boot camp, the 3-mile run, on the PFT score back then in the early 1990s, 100 on your PFT score was 18 minutes or less.
That's moving.
Yeah. And I was running 8-minute miles, right? And gassed at 220. When I graduated, I was 183. They starved me. I got weaker.
Yeah.
But my run improved, and I ended up at I was like, I'm going to get a fucking 300 on my PFT score. Go. And I ended up at 1743, 3-mile run. I never did that again.
That's moving. That's flying.
I was gassed.
Yep.
So gassed. And I was weak as I don't know what. And it took some time. I think after boot camp, just empathizing with you here in that run, 13 weeks Marine Corps boot camp, show up to my unit, and I'm 180 something. Within 2 weeks, I'm back at 220.
Nice.
Had to get uniforms, refit. It was brutal, but I was never a strong runner in the Marine Corps. It was always 8-minute miles, just because I was naturally, my body wanted to be 220. And bigger dudes, man, I could go all day. You put a pack on my back, I was like a effing mule. I'll hump all day. I'll go the longest journey, but when you asked me to run under 18 minutes consistently, I was like, nope, I'm not built for that.
Yeah. Well, I had a similar challenge at Buds. I was 230, which was by far the biggest guy.
Big dude.
I didn't lose a pound. I was there was no slimming. You know what I mean? So, you get the logs of the boats out. It was all right, this is kind of my jam because I'm bigger. But when it's just a foot race with a bunch of dudes who are $180, you're like, well, hey, I'm carrying a 8-year-old on my back. This is not fair. But yeah, once the pack comes on, it kind of levels it out a little bit because a 40-pound pack or 50-pound pack doesn't affect a 230-pound dude as it does the dude who's 160.
So you're talking about the boats, and we're segueing a little bit for the sake of time, but at Buds, what I've always heard from your community, and I can relate to this now, owning a cold plunge tub. The great equalizer, it seems like, for every guy who decides to do what you did was the cold. Would you agree?
Yes.
And wet. And I do it for 3 to 5 minutes, and I'm like, okay, I get to get out. You guys were doing this consistently from morning to evening and staying wet, staying cold. And as a Marine, I can remember back, I was like, why the hell now as a civilian? Why am I in this tub? Why am I doing this? And it's all about the DISCIPLINE, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Discipline.
Yeah.
What do you do today to keep the level of discipline that you had, or even come close to the level of discipline that you had back then?
You just hold yourself to a standard. You don't overthink it, right? Don't get emotional about it. Just do it. I did a cold plunge right before I came here, right? And it's not like this crazy thing. I'm in there for 4 minutes. In the grand scheme of things, big freaking deal.
What was your temp this morning?
41.
Nice.
Yeah. I usually just do 4 minutes.
Yeah.
And then I have a sauna down there too. I try to strength train 5 days a week.
Okay.
Be healthy. Don't go to bed late. Don't drink a bunch of alcohol. I mean, I've always been able to kind of self-impose that discipline. I've always been kind of a gym rat and just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've always taken my protein shakes. I was always that guy. So it's not really hard for me.
Yeah.
But definitely going through a rite of passage like that makes it easier on, once you're out of that phase to maintain at least some semblance of discipline.
Luke was my coach at VHP.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
That's how we met
Okay.
and how we became buddies, and, the discipline that kid has. And I call him a kid still. He's still a young buck. But huge discipline. And we started doing cold plunge in my pool together in the winter.
Nice.
And we were getting in the pool at like 39 degrees and sitting in there for 5 minutes. And I was like, this fucker standing here, I'm not moving. I'm not letting him beat me. He beat me a few times. I'll give it to him. But so you're doing those type things today. Are you getting in cold plunge for the mental toughness or for the health aspect?
I think more the health aspect. I think there's something to be said for when you feel like you're in charge. It transcends to other aspects of your life, right? So maybe doing a cold tub in the first thing in the morning, it doesn't seem like a big deal. But it kind of sets the tone for the rest of the day, or hitting a workout, or any of the things you want to do. If you kind of start on something that is a little bit difficult, and maybe you don't want to do it, but you know you should, and once you do that, the gears are turning the rest of the day for it to be, that you're stacking up those wins.
Some people would say, Bear, it's easy for you. You've got a brand. You've got to do this in some reason. Is it a got to for you?
No, not at all.
It's not an image thing like I got born primitive.
No.
I've got to be the flag bearer of that.
No, not even close.
Interesting.
Because those habits were established
It's still
long before. You know
the
what I mean?
8-year-old grass mower.
Yeah, exactly. And it's of course it's evolved, but I think it's just hold yourself to a standard, and that will allow you to be better set up for maybe some things that come across your desk that are a little bit challenging, right?
So how do you position that with your team members, with your employees? That some of them are vets. I don't know who was in what community in the military, but do you set a standard for them? Like, I have an expectation if you're in this organization to do these type things. What do you do as a leader?
Not that kind of stuff. I think the way we've positioned ourselves as a brand, we kind of naturally attract that now, which has been a cool evolution, honestly, as we recruit employees. In the early days when no one knew the hell we were, you didn't have the advantage of people like wanting to work for you. You know what I mean? Like it was just a job. But now, like when we post a new position, like I just posted an executive assistant position, we had like 400 some applicants, right? And like literally I posted an Instagram story, and then we posted it on one of the job websites, and within 3 days it was like nuts, right? Like that would not have happened 5 years ago. So just people want to be a part of the team because they see what we're doing, and I think that makes it more likely that the people coming in are already doing that. Like we have some savages. Like some of the the ladies are savages. We got some of the moms, they're getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning hitting a garage workout, and then at lunch they're going on runs. I'm like, damn, y'all are more savage than me. So it's cool.
Awesome.
But I don't really care about people's personal lifestyles. As long as you're performing and getting your work done, it's kind of on you.
John Maxwell talked about the laws of leadership. Like if you set the bar at 10, your organizational leadership will be 7s, 8, 9s, 10s. And if you have somebody who's an 11 or a 10.1, guess what they're doing? They're going, hey, Bear, I'm going to go start, X primitive. Or they're going to go lead their own organization or go do their own thing. So how do you, as a business owner now, similar to what you did with your first team, is there anything you do to kind of set the bar for the organization to constantly try to be better?
I think it's always a work in progress. I think there are challenges transitioning from a high-performing, very unique military unit to now you're with a bunch of civilians who, other than a couple, have no idea what that experience is like and what that environment you just came from. So I definitely had to recalibrate expectations of humans, and I don't mean that in a negative way. There's just, I don't care if that offends anyone. There's just no way you could ever resemble what a SEAL platoon feels like. So don't be like, oh, that's offensive. No, it's not. You know what I mean? Like, I remember I said this on one of the podcasts, and our co-founder Mal was like, "You can't say stuff like that. It's making it seem like our employees aren't like legit." It's like, no, they're not it at all. But I just went through a pipeline that literally funneled down to like this tiny little fraction of a percentage of people that, you know what I mean, that were such outliers to society that I don't think it's unfair to say this is not even close to that, because it's not. Let's just be real about it.
Right.
But I had to recalibrate that expectation because there were just some things that I thought were basic parts to being on a team and expectations and pulling your weight that were not now implied tasks that used to be 100% implied tasks, right? You know what I mean?
So can I get very political real quick?
Sure,
Do you mind?
Yeah, love it.
So we live in an environment now where, as businesses, especially with Fortune 500 companies, and me being in the financial business, I get to see some of this at a macro level. But I'll put it out there and say that we live in a world now where it seems like everybody gets a trophy in an organization, or everybody's going to get the same trophy or equity, and that in diversity and inclusion and equity, that we live in an environment now where it feels like we're coddled, and we're coddling employees for, we set this high expectation and then we coddle them to get there. What are you experiencing, and maybe not so much with your organization, but when you look at it macro, what are you seeing in the community today? What challenges are you seeing for business owners in this new DEI world?
Well, I think, I totally disagree with what's happening. I think people, especially bigger corporations, have completely lost their way. I think it reinforces the wrong values. If we want to be united, how can you possibly enact policies that are hiring people based on their sexual preference, their religion, or their race?
Right.
Are you kidding me? What the hell does that have to do with employment?
Right.
You want us to be united? Stop talking about it.
Yeah.
Right. The best person gets the job. Period.
Yeah. Which goes back to that team thing where you go, we have a standard. If you make it, great.
Exactly. And that was the great thing about Buds. It was the most purest form of what I just said. Did not care. No one gave a shit what your background was, what your education was. You have Division I athletes. We had an Olympian next to a 19-year-old kid, 140-pound Mexican kid who lived in the hood in L.A. made it, right? Wow. Because he was a savage, right?
Yeah.
They didn't care about your pedigree. They weren't like, oh, he's
you went to Yale.
He's Hispanic, so he should make it. No, he was a savage, and he was, you would have had to kill him, and he made it, and he earned his place. He earned his seat at the table, right? So I got to experience the most pure form of a merit-based title, right?
Yeah.
Because it is black and white. There is a standard. Everyone goes through the same rite of passage. It's been the same way for 40 plus years. So now that I see in society that we're hiring based on other things, the great thing about us is we can't afford to do that.
Right.
Our margin of error is so razor thin that I can't be like, you know what, that person was fourth in the stack on the candidates we interviewed, but let's hire them because they check a few boxes that we need to check.
They balance diversity.
I can afford that. Honestly, it's too competitive. Now, if you're Google and you're making billions and billions of dollars, or Boeing, and you're literally making billions of dollars a day, you can be like, yeah, we can do that, and it will have no noticeable likely impact on the organization. We have 70 employees. Everyone needs to be a good hire. And I would think that would be what we would all want to strive for, is this should be merit-based.
Yeah.
So I think it's insane. I hate it. I think it is creating division in our society. And I also feel bad for the people who are hired that would have been totally hired on their merit, but are now have an asterisk next to their name because people assume they were hired because of a DEI initiative, right?
Yeah.
That's where those people need to be louder.
What a horrible way, too, for the individual who now thinks, well, I was not hired because of my expertise that I bring to the organization. But
what we've created is a confirmation bias, right? If some of these people don't get hired, they've been conditioned by the media and their colleagues to now think, I didn't get that job because I'm blank. Insert stereotypical title of any of those things I just mentioned.
Yep.
When it's like, okay, they're completely discounting the fact, hey, you were 5 minutes late. Your resume looks like shit. You had a horrible interview. You didn't research the company, right? I knew you were a no in the first 5 minutes, right? Because you weren't here, right? Yeah. But they're not self-critical because they're so conditioned to think it's because of these other things, because they're watching CNN who's telling them, oh, that's the reason you get hired. So go sue that guy. You know what I mean? And that's a very dangerous place to be, because when you have confirmation bias, you can bend anything to be your truth. Right. Right.
That's a problem in and of itself, that when you, and not that you're the problem by saying this, but in society, we've been taught that you have a truth and I have a truth. And I go, when the fuck did truth just go away? When there's absolute truth, and then I can have context for how it's, but I can't redefine truth. And that's what's been happening, I think, in business and in society today, is that people come to the table with, well, this is my truth. Well, let's look at a coin here. We've got three sides to it. There's your objective view of it. There's my objective view. And then there's absolute truth right there in that thin line.
Yeah.
That's what we should be measuring as a society, in my opinion. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm seeing is getting pushed right now is just, I think it's getting more and more insane. And I actually had a fascinating podcast with a guy who was a former president at Anheuser-Busch, and we deconstructed the whole Bud Light fiasco. And it was fascinating to hear what had started to happen at the corporate level at that organization. Bud Light was the number one beer on the planet. Number one beer on the planet. And you know what they were great at? They weren't political. They were fun ads on the Super Bowl with a dude, a big night with a big Bud Light, and you know what I mean? And all these, they were funny, and it kind of catered to everyone. It's, you know what I mean? Like it's a safe pick if you're going to get
Anheuser-Busch as a whole, from Budweiser to Bud Light, from the what's up to I can't remember the Bud Light commercial.
Well, the Clydesdales with the Budweiser, you know, it was like they had everything going, right? And then in 2018, when the ESG initiative started getting pushed at the corporate level, because all these big-time CEOs and BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street started pushing this. All right, if we can't get it through the front door of Washington, we'll go through the back door of corporations and start pushing these crazy policies. And so all these corporations started changing it. But it's important to know the only reason they were, it's not because they believed in this, is because corporate compensation started to depend on checking these boxes.
Right.
You were started to be graded on your ESG score because Vanguard, State Street, and BlackRock were all 40.
And for those who don't know ESG,
it's environmental, social governance. I believe is the
That's right.
the acronym, and essentially, just oversimplify it, that's all the BS that you're seeing in our society right now. It did all of a sudden. It's like, where did this come from? Well, it was a deliberate effort by these three big institutions. And guess what? When BlackRock people are sitting on the board of a Fortune 500 company, and
have influence,
and all the executives' compensation is now directly tied to their ESG score, that CEO doesn't actually give a crap about DEI. He's trying to get paid, right? So, you know, this Budweiser executive started explaining to me how they took a full day to do a white privilege training. They took all the white employees and they brought in a DEI specialist, who those people are committing highway robbery. How many of those popped up out of nowhere that all of a sudden, oh, I'm a DEI consultant, Budweiser, pay me millions of dollars. So they came and did a training, and to tell them how to, like, the craziest thing, I mean, they had the slide deck about, you know, being less white and all that. I mean, it was, regardless of what side of the political spectrum you stand on, how could that possibly create unity in our country?
Right.
You know what I mean? You'll say you're a good person your whole life. You don't see skin color. You think, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden you have this jammed down your throat, and you have some person that just guilt trips you for 8 hours about how bad you are because of your skin color.
Right.
How do we tolerate that? But guess what? That Budweiser executive, he checked the box that day, and that goes in his sit rep, or you know what I mean, for this end of the year. A great example is Southwest. You remember the fiasco Southwest had when for 6 weeks they had their flights canceled because of the fiasco.
Right.
Well, guess what? Southwest executives got record bonuses that year. You want to know why? They had a giant DEI initiative on hiring, right? So they started mandating quotas based on all the things we talked about. And guess what? For the last 6 weeks, they committed zero carbon emissions because they weren't flying any planes. Jeez. So even they lost billions of dollars because of that disorganization, the executives were scored on their ESG score. And because of low carbon emissions and high DEI hires, they got record bonuses that year.
All right, so I'm going to take you back to Yale.
Yes.
You're in an Ivy League school that today, along with Columbia, along with Harvard, the hell you guys have caught in Ivy League, that agenda is being pushed all the way down to, you know, how did J.D. Vance come out? And we'll go there later as your Yale alumni. But what's going on at the university level that now is pushing that agenda out to its future executives?
Simple. The professors are all insane. They're totally insane.
They're all Marxists. Is that what it
But
comes to?
basically, yeah. At Yale, basically, yes. The academic environment is so nuts. And I've thought about this because, I want my daughter to be academically successful, and I wrestle with this. If she gets to the point where she can get to an Ivy League school, do I even want her to go? Now, will it open up doors for her from an employment standpoint and get her around really cool people that are highly talented? Yes. But I'll just give you one small example of a small snippet that I experienced at Yale that was literally things that were occurring almost weekly. There was a girl who, for her senior, and it's been years, so like the specifics of dates and stuff might be not totally accurate, but I think it was her senior year, wanted to like submit her senior art project. Her intent was to get pregnant, induce an abortion, and use the blood of a fetus for the paint on her canvas.
What?
Yes. And she said that this is a form of women's rights. It's my body. This is expression. This is art. And the school was all about it. People are writing editorials saying she's a champion for women's rights and she's progressive and the professors are supporting it. And I'm just this public school kid from Indiana. Like, have you all lost your goddamn minds? Like the fact that we're even debating this, those were the types of things that it was happening weekly. Right? And it's like, it's almost like they all try to one up each other of like, oh, I can be more progressive than you. Watch this. And it just gets more and more insane. And now we're seeing it in society. I mean, look what we're seeing in society. What was it? California just ruled that the state, the parents are now not allowed to know if their kid is getting a sex change. Are you kidding me?
Rule,
so you're telling me that kid's got to sign a permission slip to go to the field trip at the apple orchard, but he's going to change his sex, and the parents are not allowed to know about it? Are you kidding me? Because you're protecting the kid from these bigot parents. It's nuts.
Yeah.
They're trying to one up each other. So that was that. Yeah. Oh, there you go.
So we have a fact checker in there.
There you go. Thank you. Completely insane. This was the norm. This is just literally one example. I could give you a million. So the environment that we're sending our kids to in academia is totally nuts. Now, it did not affect me. I went in with a strong set of values that I learned from my parents and just hard work. I'm from God's country, Indiana, man. So you're not going to shake me on that front. So it just reinforced my values stronger. Whereas a lot of these people that show up and they're just, blowing in the wind, that can really radicalize a young person, and they leave at 22 and they think they're going to save the world, and there's all these things. And while I think a bit of that is kind of normal and expected, and I think it's a process you go through. I think when you're not paying income taxes yet, that's one part of it, because you're like, oh yeah, let's give everyone free shit. And it's like, oh well, once you see 40% of your paycheck is taken out, you start, oh, where's this going? Then you start being I think we get a little bit more conservative as we age, but we're in 22 and you don't pay taxes, and you've been just told this 4-year lie from all these people that are living.
53% of Americans do not pay an income tax.
That is crazy. But
it just,
the rich don't pay their fair share, though, huh?
Right.
Yeah, biggest lie of all time.
There you need to ante up, man.
Well, I'll send you my quarterly tax bill, and we can dispute that off air.
So I found a hot button with you.
Yeah, you did. You got me going. I didn't mean to.
No, it's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
But as entrepreneurs, and full disclosure, I am right there with you, plus some, and it's always great to hear a guest who's still, number one, to me, just like the arm tat you have. We the people.
Yeah,
I mean,
we got it.
This is huge. It really is about the people, and we're allowing in our society a minority opinion to drive the majority. That it's in media being pushed as it's most human beings believe this way, and you conservatives are absolutely batshit crazy that you're this garbage portion of society that needs to be retrained.
Yep. Intellectually and morally inferior, right? Or, you're just some hillbilly from Indiana.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing that I think needs to be said more is, the left was brilliant at doing this. I got to give them credit. They have the media in their pocket. They have big tech in their pocket. They created an environment where they made it seem as if you speak out against this, one, you're definitely in the minority. You know what I mean? Like, you're that's some fringe extremist belief, which is not. It's basic American values. And if you speak out against it, there's going to be consequences. So if you're a YouTube creator, guess what? Your YouTube's getting shut down. You don't make a living anymore. If you're on Instagram, you're an Instagram influencer, you used to get 5,000 likes, now you're getting 89 likes because Instagram turned that dial down on you, and they can do it. So they started creating consequences from a financial standpoint for people, but then also, putting people, in the spotlight. So if you were one of these people that at the Bud Light meeting said, "Hey, this is ridiculous," now you're fired, and now you're outcast. You know what I mean? So most everyday people became very afraid to say anything, and it was all, now we're muttering in on our breaths, like talking to your neighbor, like I don't want to say this out loud, but this is nuts, and we're all saying it, but no one had the balls to speak out. But thank God we're starting to see more people finally saying, you know what? I'm sick of this shit. I'm going to start saying something, and if you got a problem with it, then cancel me, but I don't give a damn.
Do you have any concern as the CEO of Born Primitive that the values and the position that you put publicly, and I've watched you do this from Fox, to your podcast. Do you have any concern as a business owner that that's a threat to your bottom line?
No. If you have a problem with the things that I'm saying, you aren't a Born Primitive customer anyway.
It's not your ideal
The
prospect.
20% on the far left that are adopting all these crazy things, you're not buying our brand anyway, because you take one look at me. I got freaking George Washington on my arm. I got the Constitution and the flag on my arm. You see the Born Primitive products. We got we have very patriotic apparel. It's not everything we have. Proud of supporters of those who serve, veteran-owned and operated. You go to our homepage, you immediately know this is not my cup of tea.
Yep.
And that's fine, because we're not trying to speak to everyone. And that's what makes us unique. All these brands, they try to speak to everyone. Oh, it needs to be this watered-down corporate message. No, screw that.
Right.
I'm in the most competitive space there is. I need to be very specific on what our value offering is. We make good product, and we have these values that if you align with them, you're going to love us. If you don't, you're going to hate us. Even better, right?
Even better.
So
identifying your ideal prospect.
Yeah, because I want people when they're wearing that Born Primitive shirt to say, hell yeah, I like what this stands for. It aligns with me.
It actually helps you in your marketing costs too. And I talk to business owners about this all the time, is that when the more narrow, and people get nervous with narrow, but the more you can narrow in on who your A profile, who your ideal client would be, you don't have to have the noise and the expense and the dollars to attract, in attraction marketing, attract your ideal prospect. Would you agree with
100%.
that?
Yeah. You gotta hone in on who you think your audience is. And, this has evolved over time, because in the early days, I was one of those people that was a little afraid. Now, I was definitely more vocal than most, but it was at least in the back of my head of, okay, I have a business to consider here. We might need to kind of toe the line a little bit. And it honestly got to the point, I think it changed when my daughter was born. I was kind of like, all right,
interesting.
I'm not going to be silent anymore. I'm not going to be a little coward and just let all of these loud people project to society that is the majority of thought, because it's not. And all these people that are just kind of like, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. Like it's I don't want to get ridiculed. It's like, no, screw that. Because look at what we're creating now. Look at what we're allowing to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So no more. They're not going to get a free pass anymore. They're going to get resistance to these ideas, and we're going to expose them. With Born Primitive, I think the moment that really kind of tipped or started to tip was, it was in the middle of the BLM movement, which I have to say my opinions on. I think people burning buildings down in the name of social justice is completely absurd and counterproductive, but that's for another time. We were about to launch a new thin blue line collection. We've sold thin red line, thin blue line, American flag stuff for a while now, and we donate a good portion of that thin blue line stuff to a charity that supports the kids of fallen police officers, right? So if a cop dies, it helps with the school supplies for the kids in college and all this. So it's a charity that seems non-controversial, right? And we had a refresh of this collection launching that summer. Like, of course, these collections are planned 6-7 months out, so we didn't know there was going to be a major rioting. Or, you know what I mean? And it's on the marketing calendar, and we came together as a group. Right? Shoot, should we still launch this? And believe it or not, my initial reaction was, we have to postpone this because this is going to stir up the hornets. That's big time. Like, this would be because
Yeah.
just by the fact that we were getting, we sold thin blue line stuff, we were getting hate mail saying like, you guys are white supremacists. Like, and it was like, what does that have to do with the craziest messages ever? People saying we're boycotting you. There were Reddit threads about it. It was totally insane. So I was pretty shook because, this is my brand. This is personal to me.
Right.
And I hadn't evolved enough to be like, oh, these people on social media are just a bunch of assholes. Don't even give them any thought. But at the time, I'm staying up at night reading all these comments. And, I'm not sleeping because it was really affecting me. And then we came into the meeting, and I had a few police officers that were in our company, and they finally said, hey, if this isn't what we're about, like, how is this? Like, we're either about it or we're not.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? And hey, our community right now is getting vilified and this, blah, blah, blah. And I finally said, you know what? You guys are right. We're going to do this. We're obviously not going to condone, what happened. But there's no reason to now project this onto 1 million current police officers in our country, right? That are getting up every day and protecting us. So I said, we're going to stand behind it, and we did it. And I think that was the kind of the domino that started to fall of, okay, we are very confident in our value set as a company. As long as we align with those values and we're consistent, we're going to be fine. There's going to be a lot of people that don't like us, but there's going to be a lot more people that say, finally, there's a company that actually stands for something. Yeah. And I saw that as an incredible opportunity to build something substantial on that pillar.
Can I interject on something that made me think about with a business coach and mentor years ago? Talked to me about beliefs drive behaviors, behaviors drive relationships, relationships drive results. And one of the things you said, it's a nugget there that I want to go back and just highlight, was that you didn't allow the beliefs of others to drive your behavior, is what I heard in that. That the coach said it to me this way, Bear. He went, hey, Kenny, it's none of your business what other people think about you. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm a business owner. I'm in business. How can I not pay attention to what they think about you? He goes, when you start driving your business based on what other people think about you, you're allowing their opinions to drive your principles. He goes, if you have a belief system and you have principles, your behavior should track and follow that. When it doesn't, you need to look in the mirror and go, what did I allow here between my beliefs and my behaviors to drive my principles? And what I'm loving about what you're saying is that you heard all this head trash. You were reading all these things that was becoming head trash for you. You went, time out. What's my principles? What's my true north? What's our core principles at Born Primitive? And if it affects ourselves, but we stick to our morals, to our values, to our core audience, it won't matter. Am I saying that right?
100%. It's great advice. And it's crystal clear to me now.
Yeah.
But in that moment, I think we were 5-6 years in. You're still finding your way a little bit. Right. I'm still active duty, so I'm juggling that. Now, we're way more, especially because we have the podcast now, so there's a lot more long form like this.
Right.
So you can't really, I want to be able to have real conversations, right? So when we launched the podcast, we kind of had to decide, are there any off
7-minute shorts? Is this 15?
Yeah, are there any off limits? And we're kind of like, me and my co-host Tony were like, hey, we were talking COVID and politics and fairness in women's sports. We had Riley Gaines on, we had Sage Steele on, who got fired from ESPN for being vocal about. So we've absolutely delved into a lot of these topics and be very transparent.
Dude, I'm humbled that you show up to my little podcast today.
It's a cool setup, man.
You were working on it.
I'm right down the road. We're on Virginia Beach Boulevard. Okay. I'm going to hop over there right after this, and we're going to
come see your joint.
I'm going to flip seats. I'm going to record one. I don't know who we're interviewing today. I got to check the notes, but yeah. So
that's so cool.
We've we're way more kind of confident in our position now. But that took some learning. And what I would say is to anyone that's in that position, establish what your values are, and as long as they're good for good reasons and you're consistent in it, don't allow other people to kind of shake your foundation. And that can be anything. Hey, if you're some diehard environmentalist or whatever, that's cool. Everyone's got their thing. Ours is kind of, we love our country. We love what it stands for. We love our, military and first responder communities, and we want to support them, and we want to leverage our platform when able to project those things in a positive way. That's kind of our gig.
It sounds to me like you never allowed the how to drown out the why. that you seem really purpose driven about your why, and it's okay to be for profit and profit driven, and still have a morally valuable why.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important because, that's been our promise since we started this thing in the garage 10 years ago. I was like, okay, what
You
is
and
it?
Mallory.
Yeah. Yeah. And I kind of said, I learned a little bit of that from Red Bull, right? Because Red Bull, we had kind of these brand traits that like you couldn't deviate from. So I was a marketing guy. So if I was going to present some marketing idea to the director of marketing for a business unit, like I knew he was going to pick apart if it didn't align with the values that we were given, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he would say, "Well, how does that tie back to this?" And if I didn't have an answer, he's like, "Not approved. It's not." You know what I mean? So I kind of learned through that okay, if we're going to build this thing, what is the foundation of what it's going to become? And those were just Mal and I's values, right? I didn't create some fake personality. The brand is essentially my personality. Because I'm not creative enough to do something else, honestly. You know what I mean? Like
You're a knuckle dragger.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, well, what are the brand traits? I guess just mine.
That's right.
We're in the garage for the first 5 years. It's not this super sophisticated vision.
So what do you say to a guy who's in the garage today that may be listening to this and he's going into retail? He's going into clothing lines, and we're potentially headed into a recession. What do you say?
Find a way to be different, and got to be different. You got to be right.
What happens when you're not right?
Well, try to pivot. You know what I mean? But I think there needs to be an honest realization that it's likely not going to work, and
95% of businesses.
Exactly. I think it's between 92 and 95, right? I usually go speak at this panel at the Honor Foundation, which helps transitioning special operations guys, transition from. Yeah. And we always do a panel, and I typically, I've done 5 or 6 of them at this point. Every class I usually go, and I usually get some semblance of a question of like, I've done 20 years. Should I go be an entrepreneur? Kind of, how do you weigh that with going like the corporate route or just a normal job, 9 to 5? And I think I give them a bit of a sobering answer. I think they're expecting me to be like, oh, go be an entrepreneur. Like you'll kill it. It's this awesome thing. Since maybe they think that's what my path was. And I kind of sober them up. All right, 8% chance of success. You're 45 years old. You have 3 kids. You have the opportunity to go make some decent money, a stable job, be home at for once, right? You've been gone in NSW for the last 20 years, or you can go, this pipe dream wild concept that might take you 5 or 6 years to get traction on, even if you're successful. You're gonna be working twice the hours you would have worked at any company. You might have to use some of your own money. You might create a further divide with your spouse because you were just in NSW for 20 years. And I basically said it's not as glamorous as you think it is, and you need to know what you're signing up for. And unless you are 100% certain, like this is what I was destined to do, and I can't kick it, and you're staring at the ceiling every night thinking about it. I say actually don't recommend it. Go.
By the way, this time you're burning the boats, and your wife and your 3 kids are on the shore with you.
Yeah, exactly.
A little different.
Yeah, 100%. And I think so. I said you need to assess what is your threshold for risk. What is your family situation? If you're single at 45, hey, you kind of have less restrictions. Go for it, right? Particularly if you have your retirement coming in, you got a little safety net there. But I think you need to be brutally honest with yourself on where you land on that, as well as I think the biggest mistake I see is people don't assess the actual market of what they're getting into. And they think, because I personally want this product or they want this service, like everyone has to, right? And they don't actually assess their audience. And that can be a very sobering thing if you actually kind of do some research. Hey, I guess I'm the only one that thinks this is a need. Okay, well then don't do it, because you're not going to be able to sell that service or product. So, kind of a little long-winded there.
No, that's awesome, and I think it's great advice. And pivoting a little bit, because I know you got to go shoot your podcast. We had talked off camera about some other side hustles that you have going on today. Hey, Jake, will you do me a favor and grab me one more bottle of water, Colwyn? Barry?
I'm good.
Okay. But in the side hustle of real estate now. I mean, you're not only doing retail, which is freaking wild, and some would say in the economic space, man, that's balls, and you got to get your product launches right. You got to get your releases right. That social environments affect, the release of a product.
Yeah.
But now you're stepping over into real estate. What's the shift to kind of have a parallel environment of being a real estate investor?
It kind of is just a way to diversify, my financial picture. I didn't
Your
want
personal financial picture, not necessarily the corporation.
Yeah. This is just me.
Yeah.
It's not related to Born Primitive.
Thanks,
so
sir.
I wanted to kind of have kind of two trains running.
Yeah.
Just in case, heaven forbid, something were to happen with Born Primitive, I would have another passive. As you know, passive income is a great thing.
Not all the same team in the same foxhole, right?
Yeah. So I kind of just became very passionate about that when I kind of just got exposed to it a little bit. So I started with one short-term rental that I had on the beach, and I realized the cash flow it was producing. And all right, well, I'm clearing my mortgage by 3x and this and that. Okay, how do I scale this, right?
Yeah.
And then I realized, there's this thing called a home equity line of credit
Mm-hmm.
that you can leverage the equity on one property to get another one.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you do the analysis on that property and you realize, that'll 2x the mortgage, okay, and boom, boom, boom. And then you use the cash flow from that to pay down the HELOC. And now you have even more equity that you can leverage even bigger. And I kind of just, to me, it was very intuitive that I was almost like, how is everyone not doing this?
Yeah.
This is insane. Because it gets easier every subsequent property almost becomes easier because you have more equity to leverage.
Yeah.
And you can't be.
We refer to that as velocity of money.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'll talk to you off camera one day.
Got it. But so
I'll talk to the
so
Yale grad about
that's
that.
been cool. I've been able to get 6 properties that way, that's something that's just happened in the background that doesn't.
So you're using leverage, and a lot of people would pick it apart with you and I on that and go, "Oh, Bear, that's really risky. That's really that could be cavalier in doing that."
Yeah, it is. I have a high risk threshold for sure, because I look at this is something we would evaluate in the SEAL teams when you do like mission planning. You have your ML COA, most likely course of action, then your MD COA, most dangerous course of action. MD COA is always, okay, what's kind of worst case scenario that could happen on this operation, right? I always look at MD COA when I'm doing these things. But to me, MD COA that I would conclude was never bad enough to deter me from doing it. All right, MD COA is you have to sell all of your assets and you go rent for a couple of years while you get yourself back on your feet. Right. Okay, big deal. I don't need nice things, right? I'm a simple dude, right? So, okay, if that's my MD COA, big deal. I'll roll the dice all day long. And you got to obviously give it a good financial analysis of, okay, what are the numbers? What's the mortgage going to be? Property, all these things. And then when the dust shakes out, what do I net? And, if there's a big decline in the real estate market, how would that affect it? Yada, yada, yada. And you factor that all in, and then make a play.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I done it. And I'm still doing that.
Yeah.
My brothers think I'm nuts.
Yeah.
But, I got 6 houses on the beach and they have 1. So, and they're doing just as well
Sounds
as I am.
a little competitive.
Yeah,
to me
100%.
there.
Well, my brother Matt, who's the other Yale guy, he's the most risk averse person on the planet. So he's always the one being like, Bear, you shouldn't. You're
from the same. Isn't that interesting? In siblings, I'm one of 4 siblings, and I've even seen this true in my 5 children about who has the insatiable desire to take risk and who's more. Hey, you know what? Can we just kind of diversify and take it easy here and not push the envelope?
Just, I guess that's the siblings. We're
DNA,
different.
right?
Yeah. I mean, it makes total sense because I was the one that I want to go be I was always kind of the one, you know what I mean, a little bit more wild. But so I think it's something that presents an incredible opportunity if you're willing to take risk, building up passive income streams is an incredible way to accumulate wealth.
Do you have a viewpoint right now? If Feds cut rates by, let's say, a half point in September,
You think do a half point? Okay,
that's the push.
25 minimum.
Yeah, 25 minimum. I think we're there.
Yeah.
Mortgage rates will likely channel that. The concern I have in that, Bear, is that it creates hyperinflation, that it pushes prices even higher because we have a very limited supply now, and
Yeah.
basic economics, supply, demand,
You mean with property?
with property
Properties.
and property values
Yeah.
that pushes values
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
How as a real estate investor, have you given that any thought and how you manage that?
It won't affect me a ton because I'm kind of playing the long game, and I think
More about the cash flow than the flip?
Yeah, I'm not trying to flip it. I'm
Okay.
trying to rent all of these out until they're all paid off, and at that point, I either now have even more cash flow because there's no mortgage payment.
Do they all have to cash flow, or just your overall cash flow be net positive?
I mean, they all do.
Okay.
I mean, big time. So it's
Okay.
It's been a good thing.
Was that because of timing? So-
yeah, part of it.
Early interest rate
I
environment?
acquired, 3 of them I acquired before things got crazy.
Okay.
Right? And my interest rates on them, even though they're like it's a commercial loan because it's an investment property. I think my lowest or my highest is like a 4.25. Right.
Wow.
So I basically got free money leveraging a home equity line of credit, which
Yeah.
was still a low rate at the time. And then the more you get, the quicker you can pay down that HELOC because your cash flow goes up.
Remind me to talk with you off camera. We'll get more into it because it'll take a lot of time here today. But cost segregation versus straight line depreciation.
Okay.
All right, and we'll talk about that.
Speaking of foreign language, but it sounds
that'll
good.
help.
Might have to do another shot of whistle pig for
we
that.
we can. I'm happy. Yeah.
No, I'm good. I got to work out at
That's
some
right.
point today. So
But man, that's awesome. I mean, we could do a whole entire podcast on that. So you're running your operation. Have you got to the point in your business where, as a owner, from that 5-year mark to where how many years now?
a little over 10 now.
10 years.
Yeah.
Have you got to the point as a CEO where you can entrust the business with a team, or are you in that daily activity?
Yes. I'm still pretty well into the trenches because I enjoy it, particularly on the brand and marketing side.
Okay.
So yes, we have a great team. That's been a cool evolution as we've kind of become more established. We're attracting more talent now. Before, we had really hard workers, great people, but we were all just kind of winging it, myself included, right? Like
Yeah.
we'd hire some random spouse and be like, all right, you're in charge of this now. Figure it out, right? Now we're getting people coming in with prior experience in these industries that are immediate specialists and subject matter experts on their
Bringing
lane.
immediate value
Exactly.
to the table. That's awesome.
And that's been really cool to see how much that can change the dynamic of what's happening. So I absolutely could leave tomorrow. They would not skip a beat. But I enjoy it.
Could the business operate today in spite of you?
Yes, absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
huge success. I
Yeah.
always ask that of a business
Yeah.
owner, is that if you can be in an environment where a business, will still run in spite of you, that's a true business. That's awesome to hear. At what point do you think you could say yes to that, and at what point where you're like, shit, if I'm not here tomorrow, orders aren't.
I'd
going out
probably
the back door.
say, 3 years ago, it would still be like, if I'm not in the mix, a lot of the ideas
Yeah.
aren't happening.
Yeah.
But we have a really talented team now, and everyone kind of gets the vision and the strategic priorities of the company. I think I give it a little edge. Like I think some of my ideas are kind of the wild ones where you're like, wait a second, where did that come from? That I think only my brain would likely produce because I'm a little nuts.
Yeah.
But the core tenets of the business would absolutely keep rocking.
I asked that because when I go back and look at stats about business, as we both were talking a few minutes ago, most businesses that start 93, 95%, according to Small Business Administration, fail in year one.
Mm-hmm.
Not because they planned to fail, but usually just capitalization. They just didn't have enough capital. Those that make it year 5, of that 5 to 7% that made it, that goes to about half.
Damn. Okay.
It's still
not great.
pretty audacious, right?
Yeah.
And so those that are at the stage you're at now where an owner can honestly say, well, for an extended period of time, I could take absence. There'd still have to be a leader, still have to be, a manager, CEO. But if you can take a step back from that business, now you have a true operation that if it can run in spite of you, that's a good day. Like Nike today in the apparel industry. It still runs without Phil. Actually, one of my clients, his uncle is the president of Nike.
Oh,
now.
cool.
And that's, one of the things we talked about is whether you love them or hate them, and there's a lot in the DEI Nike you got to get squared away. However, it runs in spite of them, but there's still a board, there's still a CEO, and there's still that driving committee. In your organization today, where do you see it in the next 10 years? Where do you want it to be? If you're looking at future Bear in its 50s.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, we are setting up our organization for, you know, the 10 years out plan, right? And I got some really good advice from another CEO who's got a company significantly larger than ours, and he said, you need to be making decisions now based on what you think it's going to be 5-10 years from now. You know, don't be making decisions only in the moment. You know, you need to be out looking at the horizon and seeing where you're going. So partly in lieu of that, as well as just me kind of figuring that out, we are building about a 55,000 square foot facility on the boulevard. I bought 5 acres, 2-story building, 35 feet ceilings. It's almost 2 football fields long.
Nice.
We'll have our distribution center attached to our 2-story office. So that will give us the facility we need for the long game, right?
How many people will you employ in Hampton Roads then? with that?
It's about 70, but
Nice.
you know, by next year when we're moving into that place next summer, it'll maybe be, you know, 80, 90. I mean, we're hiring pretty quickly.
Okay.
So, you know, I think the goal is to continue to build out the team. Obviously, as we expand into other business, like kind of sectors, then the human needs go up. You know, we in the last year we've launched a training shoe as well as a tactical line, which have been totally crazy. We're getting into big box retail now, so you need people to staff that.
Yeah.
You know, we got an outdoor hunting line that's been, you know, crazy. So
I've watched your brand, and I've admired your brand going from a, you know, ladies sports bra kind of in the garage, right? Is that fair?
Yeah.
To now even tactical clothing for. And so, are you trying to diversify the product line with different customer
Absolutely.
folks? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it gives us an opportunity to, you know, achieve incrementality with, you know, now we can sell to military and law enforcement. We can sell to that backcountry hunter that, you know, goes elk hunting out west. But also that stuff can now be sold to the government because that field layering system you need in the government for military and law enforcement. The footwear, massive industry. That's one thing I would have done differently is I didn't realize how lucrative the shoe game could be. But it's a very large barrier to entry, right? It's a very technical product. You have to have the right people, the right shoe engineers that kind of know the game. And there's huge minimum order quantities. So unless you have a couple $1 million laying around, you can't even get into the shoe game.
Nike, the Virgil collapse, speaking of shoes, I mean, and Michael Jordan, the gamble on that, like oh shit.
Fascinating.
Isn't it? It's
Fascinating
so wild.
Story. But you know, we didn't have that barrier.
Are you endorsing athletes, by the way? I mean,
not like it's not a huge part of our marketing wheel. But there's so we have a few mainstream, you know, athletes like Stipe Miocic, you know, former heavyweight champ in the UFC. We sponsor him. There's some CrossFit athletes we sponsor, and we are looking at some bigger endorsement deals for kind of what we call mass sports, so football, basketball, baseball, et cetera.
That's cool.
You know, those are bigger contracts. One of the NFL Defensive Players of the Year. It's cool now because now those agents are actually calling us, which is really neat, saying, hey, I represent so-and-so. He loves the brand. He wants to work with you guys because they like what you stand for. So that's really cool to hear that because they don't – he was with Nike, and he's like, he doesn't align with Nike's values. He likes you guys. You know, what do you think? So when my marketing director comes in and says, hey, we have so-and-so on the phone, they're interested in like that. Those are fun kind of things to be like, wow, we're getting there, right? We're on the right track if we have, you know, the most high-profile NFL player reaching out to us through his agent to say, hey, let's make a deal. And I'm not gonna continue my Nike contract because I'm done with them.
All right, I'll sidebar here of NIL and college athletics. What's your opinion?
I think what it's become quickly, I don't like it. I don't like seeing a 19-year-old roll up to his game in a Rolls Royce and a 3-piece suit that was $10,000 in a Rolex. I don't think that's instilling the right values in our youth at that age. I think it's going to create the mini NFL, and it's going to. Here's the problem: when you pair that with now the transfer portal, they're basically NFL guys that don't have contracts, right?
Right.
So now, guess what? These coaches have to deal with. All right, well, I don't want to make him mad, so I'm not going to coach him hard because he might transfer and go. You know what I mean? And
parents know the game now, so they're coming with little Johnny going, "Hey, coach, what's his NIL deal going to look like?"
Exactly. And here's the thing. And I think this is going to change because I think the the NIL deals are going to have to go through this governing body now. I think this is evolving as we speak. But when this first started, I said this. All right, here's the deal. A marketing evaluation from a marketing kind of output is a totally subjective thing.
Right.
There are alumni at these schools that have billions of dollars that literally are so bored they will do anything for their alma mater to win a national championship. There's those guys, right? And if you have billions of dollars and you have to put $100 million into a school to make it competitive at Division I level, you'll do it because who cares?
Right.
Why not?
Rounding error.
Rounding error for sure. But when there's that much money and there's that much money to be made, who's to say a guy who owns 100 Ford dealerships in the country and has all these other businesses worth $1 billion can't say, okay, every incoming freshman is going to get a $5 million contract to promote my Ford dealerships, right? Is that actually worth $5 million? No. Is he actually going to do anything with those athletes? Probably not. Maybe he throws up a billboard or something with whatever. It's not worth now 30 recruits, $5 million, $150 million. But since that's a subjective argument on what how much marketing value that provides for his entity, you can't say he can't do that. Right. If it's worth $5 million to him and the agents worked it out, that's worth $5 million. Yeah. Just like any athlete contract you negotiate. If some agent,
it's almost like trying to value crypto. Like, there's no baseline here. What do we?
Because it's not finite. So as soon as this happened, I said that's what's going to happen. You're going to have all these ridiculous deals that are disguised as sponsorships when there's no actual intent for the person giving the money to benefit from it. But it's a backdoor way to legally pay these guys. And then it's going to become an arms race. Yeah. And whoever is going to be willing to play the dirtiest and be the most shady will become the next powerhouse college football program. It's that simple. Right. And whoever has the billionaire alumni, we might have some random program that was some tier 3 program that all of a sudden you're like, where the hell did they come from? It's like, oh, that one guy, he's giving all the recruits $10 million to get a 5-star.
Colorado?
Yeah. Well, you know what I mean?
Coach Prime?
Yeah. Right. So, what I said when I was in college was, and maybe this is a little too conservative. I think that the answer could be somewhere in the middle. I said, at the very least, pay us minimum wage for the time we're spending for the mandatory events. Yeah. Because what actually happened was, when you were in season, you couldn't work a job because obviously you're in season and you have the academics. In the off season, every waking hour I had that was extra, I was working part-time, refereeing basketball games, working as like the usher at the hockey, whatever. Right. Making, $15 an hour or whatever.
The booster club.
Because I was paying my own rent and all these things. I had to make money, right? But it was very difficult. And I said, man, if we could only pay us $8 an hour for the time we're in season, I would still have thousands of dollars because, you know what I mean? It's a 40, 50 hour week, whatever. Yeah. And I said that would be a great way to just at least compensate us for the time we're spending on our sport. That way, for those that actually are not, having their parents pay for their lodging and all these other things, we actually need that to be able to get by. Right. And so that was kind of my solutions. All right, pay us minimum wage for the hours, and let's at least make that the starting point. And then maybe are there going to be salary caps? Are we putting a cap on what a guy can make? Or can some junior in high school sign a $30 million contract with a booster club from Alabama to get that next 5-star so they can win a national championship? Because what's the output on that? Yeah. Right? If that creates national championships 5 years in a row and the program makes $500 million every year, you know what I mean? Right. Like it's worth the spend. So at some point we're going to reach that equilibrium of, okay, it's not worth it anymore, but I think until then, you're going to have these kids rolling up to practice in a freaking Rolls Royce, in a 3-piece suit, and a Rolex, thinking they are now God because they had a good high school career, and they're going to be entitled, and that they're just going to transfer as soon as they don't get the job because the other starting quarterback was better than them. And every offseason, the coaches are going to have to deal with this.
Luke and I went to Colorado's game last year, got some sidelines through relationships and Coach Prime. And look, Coach Prime's one of the greatest marketers in football, in my opinion, in what he puts out there. However, when as a spectator, as a fan, and I watch these young athletes, walking the walk from the practice field over to the stadium and going through all the fans, and I'm watching their own individual marketing teams for each player. I'm like, holy shit, this has gotten out of hand. Yeah. This is insane stuff. Yep. A whole nother podcast.
They're bringing their phones out. Right. They're posting at halftime. Can you imagine you're getting chewed out at halftime and one of your players is doing a selfie video?
Right.
I'd kill that kid. You know what I mean? But that's the norm now. That the coaches have to deal with it because then he's just going to transfer. And if he's a 5-star, you're like, okay, he gets to do whatever he wants. He's getting paid $15 million this year, and he's a 5-star. So yeah, hey, you can go Instagram Live during halftime. Do your thing.
It's crazy, dude. I respected. Trying to respect your time today.
Yep.
I just looked when I did my selfie.
We totally swerved.
Oh God,
you swerved me on politics, and we never came back.
No. And so, look, man, I respect the hell out of what you've built at Born Primitive. If people want to follow the brand, what's the best way to do that?
We're just at Born Primitive, bornprimitive.com. And then at Instagram, Born Primitive, Born Primitive Outdoor, Born Primitive Tactical. We do have a podcast, Born Primitive Podcast. It's on all the channels if you want to hear me and Tony riff about a lot of the things we just talked about.
Right.
But we bring in a lot of guests from very successful from various walks of life.
When my podcast grows up, I hope it's
like yours. It looks like you got a pretty cool operation.
It's
here,
cool.
So,
I mean,
I like
we're acting as if, right?
Well, hey,
that's
perception
the
is reality, right?
That's right.
No, this was great. I appreciate you having me on, and I got to go prep for this next one that I'm about to do.
Go do it, brother.
But
thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
God bless you,
and,
your company.
Thank you. Right on.
Appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Blackbox.